Hello, everyone. Welcome to Columbia Business School Executive Education's webinar series. My name is Holly Wright, and I'm the Assistant Director of Online Learning Initiatives here at Columbia. Today, we'll be talking about structured creativity as a better approach for idea generation with Dr. Trish Gorman. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a few notes with you. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So we encourage you to submit your questions as they come to mind throughout the webinar by clicking on the Q&A box at the bottom of the window. And we'll circle back around to them at the end. We'll have a full recording at the end of the webinar and available in about 2 to 3 business days, and it will be sent to you at the email you provided when you registered for the webinar. And finally, if you're someone who uses social media, please feel free to use the hashtag CBSExecEd to talk about this webinar. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what the highlights were for you. So today we have Dr. Gorman, a strategy expert and consultant and faculty in our Mastering Corporate Entrepreneurship online program, and she is also the program moderator. Dr. Trish Gorman is the founder of an online assessment firm, KEA Skills, and serves as an advisor to various corporate and institutional educational programs. And she is also the subject matter expert for selected early stage investors and entrepreneurs. She has a long history of working with many wonderful programs, McKinsey & Company, Deloitte. She's written for Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Deloitte, and co-authored What I Didn't Learn in Business School. So without much further ado and without further delay, I would like to hand things over to Dr. Trish Gorman. Trish, welcome.
Thank you so much, Holly. It's a real pleasure to be here. I appreciate your kind introduction. I just want to remind people that they can get a recording of our session today after the webinar, and to please ask any questions using the Q&A box. And as Holly said, tweet about this webinar if that is something that you are interested in doing. Holly was kind enough to give you a little bit of my background, so I'll skip quickly over this next slide that you see. But I do want to emphasize one thing. I work so closely with people who are really masters at entrepreneurship. They're great at creating new value. They're fearless in disrupting and actually also confronting disruptors in competitive marketplaces. But a lot of my approaches are really sensitive to enterprise level innovation and to firms that very early in my career, I worked with Dick Foster, who wrote about the attacker's advantage. Well, the attacker's advantage is over those big incumbent firms. And I've always had more of a fondness for those big incumbent firms and have tried to help them survive, thrive, and make the adjustments and the transitions and sometimes the transformations needed to succeed in the changing and dynamic environment that we live in. So what we're looking for today is your great big idea. Sometimes we call these killer ideas. Sometimes people have their own internal tag for what, the next thing, the next big thing. But these are high value business options. They're built up from ideas. An idea is never really enough to sustain a new business model or a new product line or a new process innovation, but they are built from the spark of an idea. And the way we're going to talk about them today, they're prompted by questions. And I'm going to really get into what kinds of questions unlock these great big ideas. We think that innovation is not a solo activity, it's a team sport. And these ideas, these great high value business options are improved by teamwork. And we're going to talk specifically about how to craft the right team and work with the team dynamics so that you maximize the opportunity for really high potential options. And then we add something, we add competition, and we vet these ideas not just with customers or prospective customers, but in competition against other ideas that you and your firm may consider pursuing. So why are there a bunch of stamps on this page? Okay, you see the forever stamp. The left one is I think a Valentine's Day theme, and some of the ones on the right are the Liberty Bell. I bring in the forever stamp in because it was one of the first things that we could really point to, and we had the freedom to talk about that came out of this process that I'm going to discuss today. This structured creative process, taking ideas prompted by questions, working in teams, and having a very competitive feel to it, is actually how the US Postal Service came up with the idea of the forever stamp, instead of continuing to change out the stamps every time the rates went up, or even sometimes, at least in theory, down. And the forever stamp is really interesting because it's not just that it made it easier to transition when prices changed, but it changed customer buying behavior. It changed the cash flow of the Postal Service. It changed their processes and their ability to think more about different varieties and sizes and offerings of stamps. So it's not just ever one thing that makes for a really winning great big idea. So let's talk about the creative process for a moment. Many of us see it in the way that it's depicted here, as a search for that great opportunity, and then exploiting that opportunity, trying things out, and then repeating this process, search and trial. Find something, try it out. If it doesn't work, fail fast, go back, search, try something else out. If it doesn't work, fail fast, go back. This iterative process is certainly part of what you need to be doing, but it's not the whole story. And many people overinvest in things like brainstorming to get that search going. And we know brainstorming is never enough. It might be fun, but typically it's very unfocused, it's impractical. You get a lot of unrelated ideas. And what we find is important is to relate the ideas to one another and build from them. Most of the time, brainstorming has no preparation, and we actually believe preparation is essential. If people don't come to the brainstorming session with a shared understanding of what some of the issues are and where some of the big opportunity spaces may be, you're not you may still have great success, but you're not optimizing your chances of success. If you don't put some accountability on it, and then pretty much you're doomed. At least we see most implementation efforts that try to follow out of a brainstorming session don't get very far. So let's talk about some real life situations for a minute. Maybe you're familiar with some of these. We're going to have a person, let's call him Jay. Jay had a great idea, okay? And Jay's really savvy in product innovation. He vetted this idea with his trusted advisors, tested it repeatedly with customers, really got out the voice of the customer, shared what thing Jay's is needed for success. In your company, if someone come up to you in your organization, if and I have a picture here of a product or a process, really getting a lot of enthusiasm from customers. Would that be a slam dunk? Absolutely, let's get some funding, let's get some resources, let's get a team around this and go. And I don't know, Holly, if we can actually get anybody to give us their response, either chatting by typing or speaking out.
I can let you know what people say in the Q&A box, yes.
Okay, if you get any responses, please let me know, because I'd really like to know how this resonates with folks. And while you're doing that, I'll go on and tell you how this typically looks when we've seen it in companies. And oftentimes this is really interesting, but it does not have anywhere near 100% odds of success. Okay? The customer is one very important stakeholder in the success of a new idea or innovation or product idea, but we do not think that this one in particular is just kind of flow right through into implementation. Okay. So let's look at another example. Let's look at Elle, and she's maybe in the same company, maybe in a different organization, but Elle's developed a really big idea. Okay? She sized up the market and is really aware of external trends. has a very strong scaling logic, understands the competitive situation, okay, as opposed to Jay, who was really focusing on the product and focusing on that voice of the customer and the rapid prototyping. And you may be familiar with those concepts. I mean, we really recommend doing that. But Elle's taking a slightly different perspective and really developing the external point of view, looking at the value and coming up with some rough cut profit forecasts. Not getting bogged down, definitely using our best knowledge about how to do entrepreneurial accounting, and but really being able to say this is a huge potentially profitable opportunity based on external awareness and competitor knowledge. So now, what are the odds of Al's idea getting the funding and resources needed for success? And in some organizations, they really are very persuaded by an argument that says, we see trends in the marketplace, we see where the competitors are, and here's something that we can really grow to be a big and profitable idea.
Trish, we do have some feedback if you'd like to hear it.
I would love that.
Yeah. So one of our participants says that Elle has minimal chances as well because she does not have people supporting her idea. Another person said Elle's odds are much better, still not approaching 100%. And another is Elle doesn't know if her customers would respond.
All excellent comments. I can tell we have a very sophisticated audience. Yes, you're definitely getting onto to the way this story plays, right? Because yeah, Elle is maybe better positioned, but still lacking something really important and nowhere near 100%. I'm going to now introduce you to T. T has an idea perfect for you. Okay, he linked this idea to your current skills and made sure it leveraged your talent pool, leveraged your firm's assets under your brand umbrella. This is a custom-made idea perfect for you. And what are the odds here? This is a very internally aware, build from your core competencies, focus, on what you do best kind of an approach. And again, we've heard all three of these, right? Many of us have heard the rapid prototyping, focus on the customer. Many of us have heard the focus on the market, understand the trends, get out ahead of those trends, and really think about your competitive position. And that's the L approach. And now T is saying, well, no, even if you had a great idea that the customer was enthusiastic about, a big idea that had the potential to scale profitably, it has to be your idea. It has to fit at least enough with your existing business to be something that you are uniquely able to exploit and implement. And then, as one of our astute participants said, you need the support of your organization. Okay, so your idea needs to be yours, it needs to be great, and it needs to be big. And what are the odds, right? So we talk about a structured creative process which helps you to hit all these bases. You prepare ahead of time, you engage, and that engagement is what really helps to make it yours. And that engagement includes syndication, it includes getting high-level support across your organization, and it includes making sure that you're aware of who wins if you win, and whose ideas or innovations might be competing with you internally for resources. Then it has to be great. And this is about creation. This is about finding that big idea that you can get consumers or potential clients really excited about. And then it has to be big and scalable to be worthwhile in terms of your investment. Okay, so there's other ways to think about these evaluation criteria. We know we need market impact, financial impact, and organizational capabilities. I like to flip these a little bit and say, is it ours? Is it great? And is it big? And this is where your great big idea really comes from. Okay. A home run for a startup might be hard enough to get, right? So in the left-hand box here, you see a significant, highly profitable, difficult to imitate, departure from current market offerings or industry practices. So this is a lot. You're asking for something big and profitable and defensible, difficult to imitate. inimitable, we say in strategy. But if you're not a startup, if you're looking for enterprise level innovation, you've got to do all of the above, and it's got to be leader supported internally in your organization. It's got to be able to realize above whatever your hurdle rate returns are. It's got to be risk limited, or at least, you know, some acceptable risk profile for your organization. And in some ways, it must leverage your current firm offerings and organizational practices. Now, you may be thinking, sometimes we want to make an acquisition that brings a great, profitable, significant new option into our organization. But even there, I think you'll agree, if you've got the kind of experience that I think you do, that you still need that leadership support. You need to be able to show, maybe not immediately, and maybe using different accounting and performance metrics than for your existing businesses, but there are still hurdle rates, there are still risk assessments, and it's a pretty high bar. It's a very high bar, actually, to be able to come up with something that meets all these criteria. Holly, I want to pause and see if we have any other comments before I go on.
Yes, we have someone who commented that it looks like this is another facet, along with the other two, of what it takes to succeed. By itself, it won't fly.
Excellent, excellent. I really appreciate that. And that's where we're going to say bring J and L and T all together, okay? Increase the flow of ideas, increase the learning from, in quotes, failure, which means, is there a salvage value? You know, if something isn't working, what about it could have worked? Explicitly look for value, get feedback from different stakeholders, pitch early, iterate fast, and most importantly, don't just speculate. What is common to all three, J, who was focusing on the great product idea, L, who was focused on the big market opportunity, and T, who was focused on the ownership, the internally distinctive opportunity, all came at their approach using data and analysis. So these are levers that you can immediately use to improve your idea generation and your option generation in your organization. But we can go further. We can orchestrate a really structured process, create that generative pressure, and asking targeted questions, balancing evaluation and iteration. We actually have a way that we've proven over actually the last 2 decades that brings this together and sets the stage for acceptance by your organization. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you get your great big idea? Well, we use very specially crafted questions, and I've referred to those before, but these are questions that have been developed by looking at existing successful innovations and reverse engineering them. Working with a diverse team is vitally important. I've just introduced you very briefly to J, L, and T, right? And those 3 characters are 3 very different people perhaps in your organization, but a diverse team, maybe one's coming from marketing, one's coming from finance, one's coming from engineering. Your diverse team might include customers or prospective customers. We've included regulators on teams. We've included competitors on teams. So the team that's working on your ideation, the diversity of it is going to, in many ways, increase its creative potential. But we add this diversity, but then we bring back constraints and focus on one question at a time. So one of the questions that we often ask is, what would happen if we charged 20 times the price of our current product or offering? So if you're AMC theaters, then you're charging $7 for a ticket to go to see a movie. What if you charged $140 for a ticket to go to see a movie? Okay, so this question process has you focus on one thing at a time and let your creativity flow. Let this team really work the question, but for a very limited amount of time. Okay, so it's a very distilled and intense process. We capture everything that comes out of the process, but we don't say as in brainstorming, all ideas are good. All ideas are not good. Some are better than others, and we keep the best. Then we work with the best to combine them, improve them, and extend them. The process then asks you to filter out your best ideas and give them names. And we've learned a lot about the process of naming an idea. Something that is very loose and amorphous, talking about a stamp that wouldn't change the price and we'd keep the same price all the time, and we'd hook the price, or we'd anchor the price, and when we moved to the point where we said it would be the same forever, well, let's call it the forever stamp. That changes the way the idea is viewed by the group. It changes the way the concept comes together, and it also allows you to move past re-explaining the basic fundamental concept and get into, okay, now how is this going to work in our organization with our existing constraints and our existing capabilities, with our current value chain. There's a lot of listening that goes on. This sounds like a lot of doing, but there's also a lot of listening, and we actually carve out space to pitch to each other and to listen to everyone's best ideas so that we can then do the best of the best. So it's almost like a bracketed kind of a feeling where people do their best, bring their best to the next level, bring their best of the best to the next level. And depending on how large your organization is and how much you'd like to use this type of a process, we've actually had organizations that did regional big idea workshops, took the best regional ideas to national, took the best national ideas to international, and then had a overarching corporate competition for these best ideas, all using the same process of diverse teams, using questions in a very structured way. Here's some example of some more of these questions. And the questions depend on your opportunity space. Here's a question: what do we do now that our customers can do in the future? If you think about the success of IKEA's early success in furniture, it was, furniture manufacturers manufacture furniture. They build the furniture. Having customers build their own furniture was a big departure from industry orthodoxies and norms. But what can we do now that our customers can do in the future is something that right now schools and healthcare organizations, insurance companies, banks are I want to say playing with this concept of where does our responsibility end and where does our customer engage with us? And some really fantastic opportunities can come from just this kind of questioning. A very different kind of questioning would be looking at the competitive space. Who would never enter our industry? If you're Ford Motor, you say, who would never enter our industry? And a few years ago, you might have answered that by saying Apple Computer. Well, now maybe we do have Apple Car, and when we have a whole different world of automotive where we're trying to decide, is it going to be driver or driverless? Is it going to be fuel cell or solar powered? Is it going to be individual or groups moving around in these vehicles? So just starting with the question of who would never enter and what if they did opens big competitive space up. Okay, so valuable ideas don't just happen. We recommend you orchestrate these collisions, you ask these questions, you conduct analysis, and you evaluate and improve your ideas by using a very structured process. Now, we've promised you we're going to have time for questions, so I do want to stop here and give us some time for questions, because this process of bringing people together, imagine you have, sometimes it's up to 100 or so, but just imagine you have 20 or 30 people broken into diverse teams of 5 or 6, given these carefully tailored questions. They've done some preparation, they've come in, they work on a question for 5, 6, 7 minutes, capture everything they're coming up with, and it's a very structured sort of creativity where the best ideas then get pitched across teams, and the best of the best end up receiving funding and ongoing evaluation, because you don't start one of these processes without that top leadership support that says, whatever you come up with something great, we'll give you some resources to go and pursue that and see what you can make of it. So Holly, any questions that we've got or other comments that people have?
Yes, Trish, we have one question from someone who asked towards the beginning of the presentation. Can you discuss ways for an innovation group within a larger company to measure innovation?
Discuss ways to measure innovation. Oh, that's a really great question. There's qualitative measures and quantitative measures, and I'm sure you're familiar with those. We look at measuring innovation by rank ordering. We never look at one innovation by itself. We look at innovations versus one another. And basically this idea of, to simplify it, yours, great, and big are our 3 dimensions of measurement. How well does it fit with the organization and how unique is it to us? So a lot of times the way we ask that question is, here's the idea. If this idea was given to our competitors, would it be better with them or better with us? I was working with an automotive company that came up with a really great storage system that had to do with cars, but they decided that system would be much more powerful with one of their competitors than with themselves. So there's a metric of how close, how important it is it that it's yours. The next metric has to do with how great it is. How much customer support do you get for it? How does it play versus other close and far away options? So again, always relative measures. And first, is it yours? Second, is it great? Meaning in the customer's mind. And then the third metric is on scalability and profit potential. And we use some very general ideas in the beginning, but it has to meet some basic scaling metrics. Otherwise, the odds are too low to pursue it. So the metrics follow along with the yours, the great, and the big. And you may see them in much more typical, what is the market potential? What is the profit potential? And what is in the yours, you see a lot of cost issues. You see that if it's very close to yours, you often have very large cost advantages over your rivals in being able to quickly launch and bring something to market.
Thanks, Trish. And we do have another question. How do you deal with the high-level naysayer, the high-level leader who feels threatened by talent and they say no to just about everything?
That's a great question. Bring them into the process really early. I can't tell you who, I wish I could, but I sat in a meeting with a very high, with the top management team and a CEO of a very large company, and he wanted nothing to do with this process. The idea of getting in little groups of 5 and asking questions and writing things all over the walls and voting on things and having competition, he wanted nothing to do with this. And I guess you have to get that person in the room. So you have to if there's such a naysayer, they won't even come to this meeting. That's a different kind of problem. But I think this person in particular came only so that he could prove that it was a waste of time and be able to say, I tried that, that's a terrible process, never do that again. But we prevailed. We asked questions. In fact, one of the questions that really got him engaged was, we asked a question about what element of your childhood has something to do with our current offering. What element of people's childhoods has something to do with our current offering? And I don't know why that particular question engaged him, but he, for the first time in 40 minutes, he started talking and got, shared some thinking and got into the process a little bit. And you could almost see the softening happen, that he became a little more tolerant to say, oh, okay, I can kind of see how this is bringing us in a new direction. The energy in the room and the enthusiasm of other people was palpable. Although there was some people who were sitting further away from him, you could almost see the difference. Near to him, people didn't want to show their enthusiasm as much, because we have these issues with power, right? We don't want to go against what we think the leader is signaling to us. But anyway, long story short, we got this person on board to the point that by the end of this session, which was a half day, kind of 4 or 5 hour session, he said, all right, I want everyone in the organization to learn how to do this. Okay, so I have other stories like that, but that's the one that sticks with me. This person who literally arms folded, legs folded, sour look on their face at the beginning to the end said, I want everyone in the organization to do this. So from my experience, it's get them involved and show them how this works.
Okay, I think we're at just about time, but if you'd like, we could do one more question. Trish, what do you think?
Oh, I'm happy to if there are any others.
Okay, we have a bunch more, so we'll try to follow up with everyone in regard to your questions and make sure you get the information you're looking for. But to end it off, the last question we received, is it really about limiting risk or understanding the risk you're accepting?
That is a fantastic question. I think understanding the risk you're accepting is for let's just say if we had 100 great big ideas in front of us, about half of them we wouldn't know enough to be able to understand the risk at the outset. So I think I hope most of you are familiar with Rita McGrath's work on being discovery driven and on setting different metrics for different times. We definitely have an and both answer to that question. It's definitely about limiting certain kinds of what I would call fatal risks, and then understanding the risks that you're willing to take, being open to improving that understanding as you go along. And I just find in large organizations, what tends to happen is if something gets labeled as a high risk opportunity, that it's hard to move off of that label later, as opposed to being able to have more terms for that risk, and to be able to say, and again, I probably sound like a broken record, but there's a risk that it won't fit with the company, there's a risk that the market won't accept it, and there's a risk that it won't scale. And even if you can start to break those risks down and talk about them, you're better off than if you're just trying to think about risk as one unified concept.
Thank you very much, Trish. It looks like we're just a little bit after noon, so I'd like to wrap up. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I know it's very hard to get through very much in this, but I know there's some great opportunities at Columbia to get involved with different kinds of courses, other webinars like this, and continue to build your repertoire of skills. This is just one way. This structured creativity process is just one way to hopefully mobilize your organization to come up with more great big ideas that you can really own, that can set you apart in the competitive landscape.
Right. Thank you, Trish. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar to all of you to the email address you provided when you signed up for the webinar. And I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you so much.